Good. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jerry from People Matters, and we are back with another exciting masterclass series in partnership with BI Worldwide. So this series will focus on cracking the code of employee value proposition. So this is also a certification program broken into 3 modules. You will have to watch all the modules in order to be certified. So today we'll be talking about module 1, your employee value proposition, making every moment count. So before moving to the agenda, let me give you a brief of the first module. How do we create a genuine and relevant employee value proposition, one that attracts and retains employees we need? It is by focusing on key moments across the employee life cycle. So this webinar will provide you insights from global research on what those moments are and what are the elements that create an effective employee value proposition. Here's what we will cover: an understanding of the key moments in comprehensive employee value proposition, research-driven insights about the importance of each of these moments, and a few practical suggestions on how you can apply them in your company. Let me introduce the speaker for the webcast today. We have the privilege of having with us Mark Hirschfeld, Vice President for Engagement and Strategy, BI Worldwide. Mark provides thought leadership, analysis, and strategies to clients on how to improve the results of their employee, sales, and channel initiatives. He has studied and benchmarked outstanding, highly engaged employee and sales organizations. Our partner for today's webcast is BI Worldwide. BI Worldwide is a global R&R solutions provider with offices in 17 locations worldwide, serving 7 million participants across 150 countries. With over 65 years of experience delivering an end-to-end innovative employee R&R programs, BI Worldwide helps companies translate their strategic goals into impactful programs. We have saved time for you to ask questions at the end of this webcast. For those of you who are live, you can simply submit or post your questions at any time during the session, and we will try to respond to as many questions as time allows. So we have an exciting topic for us to discuss today. So without any further delay, let me invite Mark to take over. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you. Good afternoon, folks. My name is Mark Hirschfeld, and I bring you greetings from Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the United States of America. And we're going to have a lovely day here this morning, a little bit early, but delighted to be with you and to talk about this just exceptionally important topic. And so good to be with you. Welcome. And let's get to our presentation. Just bear with me here, and I'll get our deck up onto the screen. Just be with me. I'll be with you here in one moment, please. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen now. So let's talk a little bit about employee value proposition. You see here some iconic brands from the United States, and these are brands that have great awareness in the world. And we oftentimes in our other organizations, if we don't happen to work for these particular 3 employers, think, gosh, what could I do to help build a brand like these fine organizations have done? And sometimes we maybe aspire in a way that doesn't exactly meet our particular business needs. In truth, what we want to do is find ways that for each of our respective organizations, how we can bring out the best in our respective organizations so that we can attract and retain the kind of individuals who will help us to achieve our particular mission. And so one of the themes that we think about with regard to employee value proposition are those 2 critical words, fit and difference. What can we do to identify and recruit the individuals who fit within our organization? And how can we differentiate ourselves in a highly competitive marketplace? And so some of the things that we're going to be talking about today will, I hope, be helpful to you and inspiring you in thinking about how you can build better fit and difference into your particular employee value proposition that helps you to achieve your business objectives. Now, a lot of the work that has been done in employee value proposition, we've taken from our friends on the marketing side, who I think are a little bit further ahead on the consumer value proposition. We've done really better things, I think, overall with organizations in putting our brand out there and helping to identify how we can, again, have fit and difference with our consumer value proposition. We can't work with every customer. We can't be successful, but we want to build our kinds of products and services in a way where we find the niche of individuals who we can best serve and do that in a way where they are not only very satisfied, but become very passionate brand advocates for our organization. Well, we want to take that same kind of thinking into the employee value proposition milieu to see if we can, again, benefit from that on the employee side. And when we are aligned there, that can make a significant difference. Now, when companies at least have that we've had the pleasure of working with say, okay, what are we trying to overall achieve, and what are the specific business objectives that we're looking for? And it comes down to kind of these three broad kinds of business issues that we see in the marketplace. We need to do, our companies we have the pleasure of working with say, we need to do a better job of attracting people in the organization. We need to do a better job of engaging individuals. And then we also want to do a better job of retaining individuals as well. But one of the things that we think is oftentimes a gap that employers need to do a better job of addressing is that a lot of the initiatives that we see are sort of in the organizational hierarchy perspective, from going from a top-down kind of perspective. These are things that we, as leaders of an organization, want to see if we can achieve. But the question is, what's in the heads and hearts of the both prospective and current employees in terms of what would be meaningful to them? And again, taking inspiration from our friends in marketing, who do, I think, a better job of understanding the audience of prospective customers. And so let's just flip these questions then into the perspective of the employee. And so what the employees and prospective employees are thinking about more is, why should I join your organization? Why should I continue to care about what the organization is doing and my role in the organization? And then why should I stay? And so what we're going to be doing over this time period that we have in our webinar is to give you a sense of the insights about what we can do to help best answer those questions in terms of the heads and hearts of our prospective and current employees, and create an overall experience that helps us to achieve those specific business objectives. Okay. So the title of our presentation was Making Every Moment Count. And so the question is, what are those moments? And from our research and operational experience in working with companies across the globe, we've identified kind of 5 critical moments in the employee life cycle that, when we can develop a comprehensive offering and approach for each of these 5, and they're somewhat metaphorical moments, that's where we can better achieve our business objectives. And what I'm going to be doing in our time today is describing some of the research that we've seen about why each of these moments is important. And then I've got a series of questions for each of those that you can take away and begin a dialogue about these things in your organization. And I think that if there's anything that I hope that we can offer of some value, is to give you a sense of the business case of why each of these moments is so terribly important, and then help you to begin that dialogue. So the first moment is decision day. As we are putting messaging out into the marketplace, again, are we not only just attracting an overall number of candidates, but are we attracting the candidates who would be a good fit for us? I'm going to show you some of the research again about how important this notion of fit and some very tactical kinds of things that you can think about to attract not just only a large number of candidates, but the right candidates who would fit within your organization and succeed. The second moment is what we metaphorically call first day, and it does include the actual first day of an employee, but it's also that kind of ongoing or that overall process that would start pre-hire and then for the following 30, 60, 90 days in the so-called ongoing onboarding process. The third moment is every day. What are we doing to make sure that we're creating an environment for individuals where they feel that brand promise that was given to them in the initial stages of their pre-employment and first employment, to make sure that those follow through. And one of the big challenges that we see with organizations is they put a brand proposition out into the employee marketplace of saying, hey, here's who we are, and this is why we are so wonderful, and why you should come to work for us. And people believe those messages, and then once they get into the workplace, they realize that those messages don't resonate and have the truth to them because we're not following through in a way to make sure that that what we have promised to people we're actually delivering. And so I'm going to give you some insights, and again, just in our limited time, I'm going to focus on a topic that we found to be very interesting in this area, which is making sure that engagement is important across all generations of work. And we're becoming diverse in many different kinds of ways in the workplace, but that's one that I hope will be of some interest to you. Achievement Day is the fourth element, and that's when we've done a good job of creating an environment where people are producing and being successful. We ought to celebrate those moments with individuals, and I'm going to give you some insights about what we've seen about the kinds of recognition that seem to be most engaging, and then also offers a couple of thoughts about engaging a particular part of our organization, that being our sales organization. And then finally, if we've done a good job in these first 4 days, we should be building great employee brand advocates for our associates. And we're going to show you, again, some of the reasons why and what you can do, again, in building that overall experience to build those kinds of employee brand advocates who are so essential to our effective work culture. Okay, so let's get at each of these 5 moments, and we'll return to the first of Decision Day, and that's those kinds of experiences and messages that we put out into the workplace that help us to attract the right kind of people. And again, I just want to emphasize this point. Gosh, I guess about 2 years ago, we had a client come to us, and we'd been working with them on some things, and they wanted us to help them in their recruiting. And they said, we think one of the outcomes that would be success, that we would consider success in this initiative, is that we would have more applicants in our applicant tracking system. And we thought about that for a moment, and we said, gosh, is that really what we want? And what we again determined was that maybe the whole number of applicants may not necessarily be higher, but the quality of applicants, again, in terms of fit and difference. And so we want to share with you some very provocative research that we've done, and that might just help you understand where you can go in, again, hiring that right person. And interestingly enough, we're going to look at 3 different elements that we show here. One that we call idiosyncratic fit, where an individual says, that job just feels like that's a job that is just tailor-made for me, around the team of individuals that a new employee would work with, and then the overall organization and culture. So what we did in our research is we asked individuals who were recently hired in organizations to give us some feedback about this Decision Day. And we were looking at, again, kind of 3 outcomes. when people were hiring, did they overall were they showing a commitment to stay in the organization? And of course, retention of new employees, that oftentimes can be a challenge and a very expensive one if we hire people and then shortly afterwards they leave. That can be a challenge for a business, and so we want to make sure that when we hire people that they do stay with us. The second outcome is what we oftentimes hear called time to proficiency or time to competency. And that's the concept that, maybe all of you remember back into a first day that you had recently where, you're working with an organization and you've gone through some training. And then one day you wake up and you say to yourself, I think I understand what I'm doing here in this new job. Well, the speed to which new employees can get up to speed or up to proficiency is obviously an exceptionally important and can be costly for business if we don't get employees up to speed quickly. And then finally, are employees happy? Or oftentimes a term that in our kind of research would be synonymous to that would be engaged. Do people have that kind of really emotional experience of terms of how they think about the work experience? And so we were looking to say, okay, what would be the factors that would be associated with these kind of three outcomes? And here's what our survey research showed. First, there needs to be a personal fit. And so when people read this survey statement, as soon as I read the job description, I knew this job was for me. That just immediate sort of instantaneous sense that, wow, that's a job where I feel I could be successful. When employees, and you see only about half of the people in our sample said that they felt that that was the case, but when they felt that way, they were substantially more committed to the organization and substantially more happy once they got onto the job. So that's our first element of personal fit. The second is people fit. Do we feel a sense that, wow, this is a group of team, I think I'm going to have a wonderful experience here collaborating and working with my new colleagues. And you see here that engagement also, the likelihood of engagement is significantly higher, but this one now also has a relationship to proficiency. And that kind of makes sense when you think about it, that if you feel like, wow, I fit well with this team, I think I'm going to be successful, that team is more likely to help me. I'm going to be more likely to reach out to them. And so those kind of individuals who feel that fit are getting up to speed more quickly. And then finally, organizational fit. When people agreed with the statement, this organization is a place for people like me, they, again, far more committed and far more happy in the organization. So those are three factors that as you begin to think about this first moment and a critical moment of attracting people, you want to make sure that you're doing a good job in fit, but in fit in three very important and certainly aligned, but very, very different elements with regard to fit. So, as I mentioned to you, we want to do everything we possibly can to help you to have a dialogue about each of these moments in your workplace. And so, we can get you these questions because we want you to take these and hopefully will spur some very rich and meaningful conversations with other people in your organization. So with regard to decision day, are we attracting the right candidates? Are we appealing to the kind of candidates in some cases who might be in high demand? How do we differentiate our employment offer from other competition? It was recently I was with a global company at their annual leadership meeting. And it's a company that one of the particular jobs that they do is they have people who are on ships laying cable across the ocean so that we can connect like we're doing here today. And the people can be on these ships sometimes for up to 90 days. And if things don't go well with weather or whatnot, they can be on a ship for a very long time. And I was asking them, I said, gosh, that seems like that might be kind of challenging. What are you doing to differentiate or make sure that people feel that would be an opportunity for them? And they said, one of the things that it's difficult work, it's challenging and it's exciting, but because we're all on that ship together, we have a little community. And so we really find people who are interested in being attracted to that sort of close-knit kind of community. We become really a family on that. And I thought, wow, good for them. They found a way to differentiate and find the kind of people that attract to them. So these are some of the questions that I hope, again, just based upon the research that we've provided a business case for you so that you can go out and again have some rich discussions with your fellow colleagues at your place of work to see where you're at with decision day and how you can become more effective in this particular very important moment. Okay, so let's now go to that first day. And as I mentioned to you at the top, it certainly is a process of onboarding, but we wanted to give you some very specific kinds of insights around just this actual first day. And we hadn't found much research about, is the first day important? And then what kinds of things really make a good first day? And so I hope some of this information will be very actionable to you. And what we found in our research is that sadly, oftentimes new employees have just awful first days. They go to their place of work and nobody knows that they're coming, and maybe the tools that they need, computers and whatnot, oh gosh, we don't have those things. And these can have meaningful kinds of impacts on how people feel about their overall engagement. And so again, here's just some of the research around just one element of this overall onboarding process and why it's so terribly, again, important that we follow through with that kind of brand experience that we've put hopefully into the marketplace to attract the right candidates. So one of our research that we, again, mentioned, we just went to a group of newly hired employees and we said, how was your overall experience on the first day? And you see just a scatter plot that indicates, just a very strong correlation here between what the importance of why a first day sets the tone. And so then we were particularly interested in saying, okay, what are some of the factors then that make a good first day? What are some of the very tactical things that we could do to create a better first day for our associates? And here were the factors that we studied. And so you see in our color coding, the sort of light red is employees who indicated that they had a bad first day. And then in the green, you see individuals who had a great first day. Now, you'll see some of those statements are reverse coded, but it gives you just a really clear kind of set of behaviors that we want to make sure that we very specifically manage, including just being recognized. Learning something about the organization. If we have a chance to connect with some senior leaders who are aware of us joining the first day, and then again, even just down to some tactical things. If we're waiting around, we're not, not getting things moving, we're not getting the resources that we need. And so this is a list that you can take and say, okay, how are we doing? To make sure that from a tactical point of view, we're creating an overall experience on that first day that makes that first day very, very meaningful, so that again sets the tone, if you will, for the rest of our work experience for that associate. So that's a little bit about the research with first day. Here again, I offer you a series of questions for your review and reflection and discussion with your colleagues. Do you have a challenge? Would be that first question. Are you having individuals hired and leaving within a relatively short period of time? And can you find out what might be some of the cause or causes with regard to that? What are we doing to get employees up to speed as quickly as possible? One of the things that not only our research shows, but other academicians have showed, is that we want to spend some time helping our associates catch on to our culture. What are some of the both written and probably more importantly, unwritten rules about how we do things around here, and getting that information to new associates as quickly as possible. Although we've just hired people, our research also shows that if we can begin to help people see what other career opportunities might be available for them as they come on, so that they can see a future here. That's what that third question is about. The fourth question is really about one of the things that oftentimes managers have, in our view, a misunderstanding about the onboarding processes. They say, "Oh, that's something that some other department does. That's something that human resources does or training does." Certainly those functions have a very important part in that, but managers are exceptionally important in the onboarding process. And then that final question, what are we doing to recognize new employees? And we found actually from some of our research that when new employees are recognized within the first 60 days, they are far more likely to stay with the organization. And the research study actually was very provocative in that, when I first went into it, I wondered, well, what would employees, can they in just a mere 30 or 60 days actually do something that could contribute to the success of the organization? And our research says yes, that very much is true. And so, do we have are we looking for some of those times when new associates are catching on quickly, helping in some kind of way to recognize them so that they really feel like, again, they've made a good decision in coming here. They are valued and appreciated in some very specific ways. So that's a little bit about first day and that onboarding process that, again, is so exceptionally important in the employee life cycle. Let's turn now to every day. And this is a topic that we could probably spend 3 master classes on just in itself. And so as I was reflecting on some of the kinds of things that we've been asked frequently with regard to everyday activities, oftentimes this business of generational diversity comes up. We have, again, diverse workforces in all kinds of ways. When I first started doing some of this research back in the 1990s, for example, there were 2 generations in the U.S. workforce. Our daughter was in grade school, and 20 years forward now, she's gainfully employed and doing well, and now she's a part of a 3rd generation and a 4th coming. And so we wanted to kind of explore some of these things, and to try to sort out, what is reality, what are some meaningful differences by generations, and then are there some things that perhaps maybe aren't as grounded in reality, and we should understand these things very clearly, because the assumptions that we make about individuals, including things like generation, that can oftentimes dictate our behaviors. So just a few thoughts with regard to this business of generational diversity. One of the things that we had seen in research is, are millennials, are they the least engaged generation? They're not as happy and not as engaged as older generations. And we found actually in our research that is not true. We've done global studies now for several years around what we call our new rules of engagement model, and that's the model that I'm showing to you now. In the research that we've done, now I think it's for about 7 years across the globe, we've tried to understand what are the factors, or in what we call rules, that have a strong relationship to the kinds of intensity of performance and commitment that we've been talking about. And these are the 12 factors. By the way, as just part of your certification process, you'll be receiving a very short white paper that we wrote that goes through and gives you a little bit more description around each of these factors. And so for time purposes, I'm just going to present this to you. And then if you're interested in learning more about each of these factors, that white paper should give you a nice primer on our research, and again, some of the relationship of these particular factors. And you might, again, think about, what you're doing in terms of improving these particular factors in your place of work. But we conducted the survey, and then we again looked at the overall results from our global study by generation. And here are the results. Over a 3-year period of time, you see that the overall score on that new rules of survey that are of the factors that I just showed you, the overall results are statistically the same. And so if we have this kind of mindset that says, oh, young people, we can't engage them, I would just, respectfully ask you to reconsider that based upon the research that we have. So younger employees can be engaged, but the question is, how can we best do them? And here just are a few thoughts from our research study, which maybe will give you some different insights into that. The second thing that we heard again or saw in some of the literature is they said, well, these young people, these millennials, they need meaning in their work. They need to see that their work is something that they can really love, and that they can have a job where the mission of the organization is important, and they can see the contributions or how their particular contributions would be contributing to something overall that's more important to them in their life. And the research said, well, actually, that's kind of half true. Do millennials want that? They absolutely do. But do folks like me, and at the top, you maybe saw I've got a little bit more gray hair in my head. Do other age groups want that kind of same experience? And our research says actually that we all do. That both millennials and non-millennials, in terms of their intensity to perform and to commit, again, a very strong relationship. And here in the United States, there's actually been a longitudinal study that's been done, that's been supported through our government, which again shows that going back to research that was done in the early 70s, again, individuals who were young at that time, and that would be individuals like myself, we still wanted that kind of meaning. So again, a little bit of maybe a misperception about that, and my takeaway would be is, do millennials want meaning in their work? Yes, but so do the rest of us, and so let's manage accordingly. So based upon some of that research, and these are some things that are even broader than that, but again, just a series of questions to perhaps inspire and challenge some dialogue with regard to everyday. Are we training our managers to make sure that they bring out the best in each of our team members? I think oftentimes we look at people and we see them through a lens where everybody's kind of the same, and that really isn't true. Each of our new associates and people that we're working with have different strengths, have different interests, have different ways that they learn, have different ways that they might most value being recognized. And to the degree that we can understand and bring out those strengths, that really improves the chances that those individuals will be engaged and happy at work. Do we understand, again, how people make a difference? That really is going back to that meaning. Do employees feel like they can bring ideas forward and help the organization be successful? One of the things that our research says is that when we create an environment where we can allow people to feel heard, that there can be, in this particular sense, a different kind of diversity, if you will, a diversity of thought, that has a significant impact on innovation and creativity in our workplace. What are we doing to help our high potential stretch and grow? And then what are we doing to help our team members take better responsibility for their health and well-being? We're working harder when we're more connected. We can be online all the time, and we can pay a price for that. So what can we do to make sure that our associates are productive but not being burnt out? How do we measure and trend engagement of our associates? There are ways now to measure. Back when I started doing some of this work 25, 30 years ago, conducting an annual employee engagement survey was just a logistical nightmare, but with the use of technology, we can do that and do it more frequently so that we can see where engagement is and make changes accordingly. And then finally, how do we engage all members of our organization and different strategies, again, related to some of those demographics. And again, my emphasis on this would be, what really is myth and what is reality, based, again, on some of the research that I shared with you. All right, that's a little bit about every day. Let's go now to Achievement Day. And I want to start just with a story. I mentioned to you I was at a global, a national meeting here. It happened to be in the United States, but people from all across the globe with one of our clients was there. And we got to speaking about the business of recognition. And one of the things that someone said as I was talking about the importance of this Achievement Day, someone raised their hand and said, and this was a group of about 250 leaders, if you can just imagine us in a large meeting room talking, and one of the people raised their hand and said, Mark, I think I'm with you with regard to this business of recognition. But sometimes I have to confess I'm a little concerned that if I recognize people too much, that might go to their heads. They might think that, well, I'm doing great and I don't need to stretch or I don't need to achieve. And I thought about that for a moment. I thought, well, that's an interesting question. I said, well, let's see if we can get some evidence of this. And so I looked out at this group of 250 top leaders, and I said, let's test this out. Anyone here in the group who is suffering from too much recognition, raise your hand. And they all kind of laughed took my bit of humor in the spirit in which I hope they would say is, can we maybe recognize people too much? I think that's possible. But I think it's more likely that we're not recognizing people, we're not seeing the successes, and maybe not using all the different kinds of recognition tools at our command. And so if I was going to ask people to err on that side, I would say, I think we need to do a better job of providing more recognition and diverse kinds of recognition. And most importantly, I have some research to back up my argument, which I'll share with you now. I mentioned earlier about the importance of meaning. And one of the things that we found in one of our recent studies was the importance of, again, recognition, but more importantly, recognition that, again, fits at that meaning. How are you making a difference here when you helped that customer to deal with one of the challenges they were having? When you had a team member who was struggling and you worked to help that team member so that a project that we needed to do got out on time, and that was very important to other parts of the organization. Connecting recognition to those kinds of things that are meaningful for people. You see the just very strong relationship from our research. That kind of recognition is the best predictor. It's not just saying, good job. That's okay, but it's better to say good job, and here's how you're helping. Here's how you're making a difference. Here's how what you did is contributing to the overall success of our organization. So recognition, good. Recognition that is aligned and supporting the kinds of overall mission and objective in our organization, even better. Recently, I had a group who said, gosh, that sounds like that's very a lofty kind of thing. And, we're not in, the business of saving people's lives in a medical device company or something, a pharmaceutical company. And I thought that was really interesting. And what I would say to you on this is I think there isn't an industry, there's not a job that I know of that we can't help individuals see where they have meaning in their work. Just recently, I was working with a large global restaurant chain, and I had the opportunity to interview some of their very best restaurant managers. And one of the restaurant managers, when I asked, I said, do you have some kind of mission or purpose in your life? And he thought about it for a moment, and he said, yes, I do. When people come to the restaurant to work, most of them, this is their first job. And he said, if I can help them to feel a sense of pride in their job, and a sense of responsibility and a sense of working hard to take care of other people. He said, I think I can impact how those young people feel about work for the rest of their life, and they may go on and do something else. And I was just so inspired by that. And it reminds me that there is meaning in any kind of work. It's not relegated to just one industry or another. And we can do good things to affirm that. One of the things our research says is that there are different kinds of ways that people can be recognized. And you see from our benchmarking study some of the different kinds of ways that we ask people if you receive something. The lowest would be, some kind of service anniversary award, a little bit more something from a manager. So you see kind of the frequency of recognition that is out there. And it kind of makes sense when you look at those different kind of groupings that some kind of recognitions would be more frequent than the other. But this next slide really shows the importance of using different kinds of recognition to engage people. What we found here, and you see just the correlations are very, very strong, is that when people receive the different kinds of recognition that I showed before, they're less happy and engaged in work. When they receive one of those, just a really nice bump in their overall engagement, 2 a little bit more, and then 3 even more. And so what this research tells us is that when it comes to recognition, there isn't one kind of magic tool, but we should have multiple tools at our command and use as many of those tools as we possibly can. And when we have that diversity of recognition tools available, that gives us a chance of having more engaged individuals in our workplace. We do quite a bit of work in our organization with regard to service anniversary, and so we wanted to see, is that specifically one that has a strong relationship to those outcomes? And again, the research there is very convincing that that is, again, just one very important tool. Now, I mentioned to you that we also had some insights about recognition with regard to salespeople. And one of the things that we do here in our firm is that we support our clients in conducting various kinds of sales incentives. And one of our sales incentives before the program actually launches, salespeople go in and register, and there's some things that they have to do. And just prior to the incentive, we actually conducted a survey with those people. This happened again to be a global study of roughly 5,000 salespeople across the globe. And then after the sales incentive began, 60 days later, we looked at all of the sales results and to see if there was a relationship between how people felt about their workplace going into the incentive and their actual performance. And you see here a very, very strong and powerful relationship that individuals who felt like they were receiving recognition in their job were selling more units. That 18, 19, 20, that's actually the number of units that they sold in that 60-day period of time. And you'll notice that it says here controlling for baseline. What that means is that these results were actually across performance quartiles. And so whether it be top performers or less strong performers, when they were feeling recognized at work, they were actually delivering more business. A little difference that we see with salespeople with regard to recognition, oftentimes sales organizations will have for their producers some kind of top performing, a president's club, that kind of thing. And we found in just a recent research study that we conducted that the millennial generation actually likes more of an individualized, customized kind of travel experience versus doing something more in a traditional kind of group travel. So that was, again, a meaningful difference by age, which was just very interesting and maybe a meaningful trend that we're going to be watching over the coming years. So here then are some questions that, again, you might be thinking about. How are we recognizing people, not only our top performers, but other individuals? What kind of emotion do we have in our celebration? These are some of the things that, again, you might want to think about in terms of what you're doing and how you can, again, more effectively implement programs that better align and support this so-called Achievement Day. And then finally, if we've done, as I mentioned, a good job on each of those 4 moments, then we get to what we call referral day. And what are we doing? And is this total experience helping our employees to feel like, again, they are brand advocates, and in this particular case, advocates for us as a workplace. And we just wanted to show you that when we do all of these things and ultimately then people say, you know what, I really am happy here. I love this job. You know, what are some of the things that people are saying? And again, we can maybe kind of dissect this in a way where we can, again, understand what are some of the factors that drive that. And so with regard to referral day, and if you go back to that model that I showed you with regard to the new rules of engagement, these are the factors that really have a strong association with then people saying that they're very happy. And then we also ask them that when they're happy, what are the kinds of things that they are experiencing that relate to that? And so you see a whole series of specific kinds of behaviors, or rather not things that they're experiencing, not behaviors, but activities that have a strong relationship to that. And so, again, you can look at some of these things and say, are we doing these things? How well are we doing? Can we do better with different segments of our employees? That kind of thing, again, to build those brand advocates. And one of the things that we found was very interesting from our academic research is building that brand advocacy very important. And one of the things that we found is that when we build those advocates and they're so strong that current employees will refer people, those individuals who refer people are more likely to stay with us. People who have been referred rather, but interestingly enough, people who actually do that referring, who are those kind of brand advocates, on average stay longer. And so there we think is a really important set of insights about why we want to build that brand advocacy, because in this particular case, it can have a significant impact on the retention of our associates in our organization. So then a few questions around what are we doing, again, to build that brand advocacy? Do we have ambassador kinds of programs? Do we have a referral program in place? And is it effective? And are there things that we can do, again, to encourage and incentivize and thank individuals who have been wonderful advocates for our organization? Well, that concludes my prepared remarks, and I am now going to just go ahead and stop sharing the PowerPoint presentation. And I'm back on your screen. And I hope we've got some time here to answer a few questions. So hopefully stimulated a few thoughts, and happy to chat with you folks for a bit.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark, for those great insights. So before we move to the question answer, if you as a viewer, you can provide your feedback in the survey link that's available in the chat section. Your input matters. So we have a bunch of questions here. So Vikas asks, how does the 5 days help to formulate EVP? So perhaps you could talk a little bit about the thinking behind the 5 days and how it's correlated to EVP, employee value proposition.
Wonderful question. Thank you. What we initially did when we started this work is to look at all of the research out there with regard to employee engagement to see, are there some particular patterns of engagement, and how do those patterns fit along the employee life cycle? And so that's how we built the model, was to say, okay, when new employees are coming in, for example, and we see that, and we just didn't know this, and I'm talking about first day, for example, we just said, does the onboarding process make a difference? And we really didn't know and hadn't seen a lot of that research. So we said, okay, let's look at that and let's investigate. And we found, for example, the research that we showed that said, yes, it does make a significant difference, that people who have a great first day are likely to stay. And then, what are some of the specific kinds of things that we could do, which were on that list about recognizing people, making sure that we had the resources ready, making sure that the teammates were ready. So we didn't say, here's our model, and then let's try to justify it. We said, what's going on? What can we do to research these things to validate that indeed each of these moments make a significant difference? And so we lay this evidence out for people to consider, but we think we have a building case, the research showing that each of these 5, again, moments are making a significant difference in toto, creating that kind of overall employee value proposition experience.
Great, fantastic. We have a cluster of questions on quantifying EVP. So I'm going to take them together. So Nabaron asks, can EVP be quantified? And we have a related question. How do we measure EVP, by Mushangi? And we have another question by Kushbu, who asks, are there any tools to measure EVP?
Yeah. Wow. Wonderful questions. Thank you. I think the thing that with regard to measurement, what I would say is there isn't one perfect measurement, but we can look at data points from a whole series of things that were important to us. So I mentioned, for example, technology allows us to conduct employee engagement surveys more frequently. We can pulse So to get sort of the sentiment, the head or the heart, which again is self-reported to people, that's a way of doing it. But then there would be other indicators of things that would be important that we could look at through, things that would come out of our human resources system, for example. Is turnover better? When we're onboarding people and we're going through their training, can we validate through the training program that as they're testing various kinds of things to make sure that they're competent, are they getting up to speed more quickly? And those are very quantifiable things that we can look at. In my early years with one of my first mentors, Dr. Clifton from the Gallup organization where I started my career, he said that when it comes to these kinds of things, there might be three ways that we can measure things, and we can't always measure each of these in these areas. But he said, can we count something? Mm-hmm. Can we rank something? Or can we rate something? And so when we think about this employee value proposition, there are ways to measure these things by counting things, by rating things, or by ranking things. And so it may be a series of metrics that either are counted, rated, or ranked that in toto can tell us that we are making meaningful progress in the development of a truly rich and appropriate employee value proposition for our organization.
Great, fantastic. We have a question from Pooja, and I think also from Drishti a little later on. How can we help our employees assess their people fit, and how can we enhance the same?
Wow. Gosh, you folks are asking great questions for me early in the morning. I like the challenge. Thank you. There are some tools out there where people can begin to get a little bit of a self-assessment, and again, there maybe isn't necessarily one tool out there, but various kinds of things. So, for example, and I'll just give an example, there are a number of tools that are available that help. Say a person is interested, they like their job, but might be thinking, gosh, I'd like to try to do some other kinds of jobs. There are self-assessment tools that are available, some in the public domain or some that employers can provide, that where people can give some feedback about, gee, I might kind of like these sorts of jobs, and their ratings then can be correlated to say, okay, well, other people who have liked those jobs, here might be a series of jobs that you might be interested in. Now, that doesn't necessarily take into account that they have the right training or certification. I might be a my interests might compare and say I could become a neurosurgeon. Sadly, that's not what I studied in graduate school. So you have to kind of take these things in the appropriate kind of way, but you can use an assessment where you compare your career interests to other people, and then that can give you some insights. So those kinds of tools can be available, and some of them might look more toward like career interests. There might be some self-assessments around your learning style. There are some self-assessments about how you, for example, might be best recognized. So seek out those things, and again, can be used to, and one of the things the final thing I would say on this is, we're seeing more employees wanting to take greater responsibility for their own career. Yeah. Wanting to, versus just sort of smartly saluting and saying, yes, boss, I'll do what you tell me. They're saying, no, I'd like to take more of that advantage. And so to the degree that employers can provide those kind of tools and help people to grow and learn about those things, organizations are going to probably be in a better position to retain those people, because the employees will say, hey, that's great. They're providing that resource to me. They're trying to help. They're investing in me. So, I think this is a good place for me to stay.
Right. Fantastic. We have another question from Dal Green, and the question is, how is employee value proposition different from employee experience in any of the moments?
Yeah, no, they're really kind of two sides of the same coin. The proposition is sort of the statement, the overall kind of written thing that we as an employer would line out. and would be, part of our strategy. And that from that value proposition, then what does that do to then create the experience for the employees? So they're really two sides of the same coin.
Right, right. So Surabhi asks, how do we instill pride in the next generation?
Wow. Well, going back to what I suggested in the research, I think this generation wants to feel pride in their work, but as I suggested, even folks with gray hair like me want to feel pride in their work. And so some of the things that I think our research would say, and I would again refer to the white paper that I will be part of the materials that we'll be providing people. But I think some of the things that really have a strong relationship to pride at work would be as follows. First of all, people feel that they are understood. That managers really understand them, and again, their strengths and their interests and their career goals. I think really is important, so that people don't feel like they're looking at me just as another, kind of robot. That we're seen as human beings. I think really has a significant impact with pride. I think again, when people feel truly appreciated in their workplace, I think oftentimes people do a lot of work that they personally feel pride, but aren't those things aren't acknowledged by others in their workplace, and I think that can oftentimes be very demoralizing to people. So again, I was kind of teasing about my comment with the leadership that have you anybody suffering from too much recognition, but I really do feel that we sometimes think or we just ignore, or sometimes managers. I'm too busy. I can't take that time. And I think we suffer when we don't invest in associates and helping them to understand that we truly care. And when we do, that bolsters the pride that people feel in their work, which again then increases the chances that they'll stay and they'll work hard on behalf of our company. Right,
fantastic. We have a couple of questions about the research, and more specifically about the definition of millennials. This is from Priyanka, and I think also from Trupti. They want to know what was the specific definition of millennials in your research.
Yeah, I can get you the exact dates. I'm happy to follow up with that. Those definitions are a little bit different. There isn't one specific kind of definition. We take out the definitions from a group called Pew, P-E-W, which is a global research firm that started here in the United States. And what I would say, by the way, with these definitions is that the difference, as you go from, so for example, boomers, the definition of when the boomer age ends is sometimes between 1960 and 1962. Some that were in there. I was born, for example, in 1959. Well, these definitions, it's not like, something happened in 1961 where all of a sudden people started thinking very differently. These kind of tend to change, very slowly over the generations. And so they're, it's a good question, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, but I just want to help us understand that these are kind of more on a continuum, and that we put these artificial kind of demarcations in there so that we can then explore some of these associations. And are there some differences? The answer is yes. And then from our research, regardless of whether you put it at 1960 or put it 1962, the trends that I've shown you will largely stay the same.
All right, great. So let's take one more question. Who are all the stakeholders in creating employee value proposition? This is from Priyanka.
I'm sorry, one more time to the question, please.
Who are all the stakeholders involved in creating the employee value proposition?
Wonderful question. One of the things that we've seen where organizations are doing an outstanding job of delivering that employee value proposition is that this then is an initiative that is cross-organizational. Oftentimes, some of the initiatives that we've seen where people are trying to do some of this, one function like human resources would say, well, we own this. Well, again, I think human resources needs to be actively involved. It's an important profession. My wife actually is a human resources person, so I think that's really important. But what's I think been very beneficial is that employee value proposition allows us to develop a narrative across an organization. So that could be with people in human resources, it could be people within training, it could be people within employee communications, and then also people on the operational side. As you saw from some of our research, managers need to be actively involved in this experience. And so from a best practices point of view, when stakeholders across the organization are very intimately involved in the development and the execution of this employee value proposition, the business results are much, much better.
Right. Great. Fantastic. We have a lot more questions pouring in, but I think at this point in time, I would request Mark to take them offline. Once again, thanks to our webcast partner, BI Worldwide. Also, a gentle reminder, if you haven't given the feedback on the survey link, you can do that on the chat section. Thanks, Mark, again, for joining and sharing this invaluable information with our audience today. I'd also like to thank everybody who joined us for this webcast. Thank you so much. And stay tuned for Module 2, which is about the role of leadership and the psychology of employee value proposition on May 24th. That concludes our webcast today. Thank you and have a great day.